What if the only moment that could save your life was also the moment that stole your breath? The desert wind carried more than heat that evening. It carried the misery, danger, and secrets of Crimson Creek, Arizona. Mary Whitfield pressed her cheek against the grimy window of their one-room shack as tumbleweeds drifted across the street like ghosts of better days. At 19, she already knew disappointment better than most folks twice her age. Life had not given her softness. Life had given her survival. Behind her, Samuel Briggs' voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Mary, get your worthless hide in here." She flinched. Her stepfather was drunk again. He was always drunk. Mary stepped into the back room, where Samuel and 3 men sat at a card table clouded with tobacco smoke. Jack Thornton from the general store smirked at her the way a man shouldn't look at a girl. Marcus Webb, the kind of man who dealt in human misery, watched her with cold eyes. And the stranger in fine clothes studied her like he'd wandered into the wrong kind of trouble. "Gentlemen," Samuel announced proudly, "meet my stepdaughter. Pretty little thing, ain't she?" Mary forced herself not to react. Fear only fed men like these. "Fetch us more whiskey," Samuel growled. She turned to leave, but Jack muttered, "Careful, Sam. You're already in deep. Might want to stop raising." "I got assets," Samuel said. Those 2 words made Mary's stomach twist. When she returned, the room had gone quiet. Cards lay face up on the table. Marcus Webb leaned back in his chair as if tasting victory. Samuel looked pale. $400, Webb said. "That's what you owe me." "Marcus, be reasonable," Samuel stammered. "I've been reasonable for 3 months." Mary watched her stepfather glance at her with a strange calculation in his eyes. She stepped back instinctively. "What if I had something better than money?" Samuel said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I don't deal in promises." "Not promises." Samuel grabbed Mary's wrist and yanked her forward. "Her!" The world seemed to tilt. "You can't be serious," Jack said, though hunger burned in his eyes. "Dead serious," Samuel answered. "She's young, strong, untouched, worth every penny." Mary felt the room closing in on her, felt the breath leave her body. "I'm not property," she said, voice shaking. Samuel's hand lashed out. The slap knocked her sideways. "You'll do as you're told." Marcus stood and walked around her like a man examining livestock. "She'll bring good money, but untested goods are risky. Might run." "Chain her if you have to," Samuel shrugged. Mary's heart pounded wildly. Her life was being traded like a bottle of whiskey. "I'll take her," Webb decided. "Cash. Bring her to my place tomorrow night." The desert rose. Every girl in Crimson Creek knew what happened there. Girls went in. They didn't come out. Mary's breath caught. She backed away, tears burning her eyes, and fled behind the thin curtain she called a room. Her mother had been gone 2 years. Samuel had grown crueler since. But this was a line she would die before crossing. That night, when Samuel passed out drunk in his chair, Mary grabbed a bundle, her mother's silver locket, a clean dress, a small knife, and $3 she'd earned from mending clothes. She forced open the window, bruising her ribs as she squeezed through. She ran. Crimson Creek disappeared behind her as she headed west, toward desert and darkness. She walked until her legs trembled, hid when riders passed, drank from a canteen that emptied too fast. At dawn, she looked back and saw dust on the horizon. They were coming. For 3 days, she pushed herself across blistering sand and jagged rock. Her boots split, her lips cracked, hunger hollowed her stomach, but fear kept her moving. On the 3rd afternoon, she stumbled toward a line of green cottonwoods, a river, salvation. She dropped to her knees at the bank and plunged her face into the cold water, gulping greedily. Only when she lifted her head did she hear it, the splash of someone bathing upstream. Her heart lurched. She crept through the willows, pushing branches aside. What she saw made her breath catch. A man stood waist-deep in the river, broad-shouldered, scarred, strong. Water rolled down his back as he lifted his hands to slick wet hair away from his face. He dipped beneath the surface again, rising with a slow inhale that showed the sharp line of his jaw. He was beautiful in a dangerous, rugged way. And she should have run. But something about him held her still, the calm in the way he moved, the quiet strength in his posture. A man alone, but not lonely. A man who looked like he belonged to the wilderness. Then he turned, and his storm-gray eyes swept the trees. Mary froze. James Callahan had lived too long to ignore the feeling of being watched. He reached slowly toward the rock where his gun belt lay. But when his eyes found the flash of calico through the brush, he didn't draw. He lifted a hand instead. "Peace," he said gently. "I know you're there. I'm not going to harm you." Mary's breath came shallow. She wanted to flee, but her legs were weak. "You can come out," he said, "or stay hidden. Makes no difference to me. But you look hungry. There's food at my cabin up the river." He walked to the bank, dressed without hurry, strapped on his revolver, and started upstream. He didn't look back. Mary watched him go, torn between fear and the pull of safety. Where else could she go? Webb's men were hunting her. The desert would kill her if they didn't. So she followed, slowly, carefully, each step a gamble. When his cabin came into view, a sturdy place of logs and stone, he already sat on the porch, cleaning a rifle. "There's beans and cornbread on the stove," he said without turning. "If you're hungry." Mary stood at the edge of the clearing, trembling. "Why?" she asked. Now he looked at her, really looked. "Because you're running, because you're scared, because you don't have anywhere else to go." His voice was steady, kind, but not soft. And for the first time in years, Mary felt her knees weaken from something other than fear. She stepped toward the cabin, toward him, toward the one moment she could not yet see would change everything. Mary stepped into the small cabin, her heart still racing from fear and uncertainty. The space was simple but solid. A bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, a warm stove that filled the room with the smell of beans and bacon fat. It felt safer than anywhere she'd been in years, though she didn't quite trust that feeling yet. James stayed on the porch, giving her room to breathe. She served herself a bowl of beans with shaking hands. She ate slowly at first, then faster. The warmth filled the empty place inside her chest where fear had been living for days. When James finally stepped inside, she shot to her feet like a cornered deer. "Easy," he said, raising a hand. "Just checking the stove." She nodded, clutching the bowl like a shield. "You want to tell me what you're running from?" he asked gently. "No." "Fair enough," he said. "How about a name?" She hesitated, then answered quietly. "Mary." "Well, Mary," James said, "you can stay here tonight, rest, eat, no questions, no debt owed. You leave when you're ready." Her throat tightened. She didn't trust kindness. Not from men. Not anymore. "I can work," she blurted out. "Cook, clean, mend. I don't want charity." James leaned back, studying her with careful eyes. "You're not charity. You're someone who needs a safe place to sleep." "That's enough for me." She didn't know why, but those words broke something loose inside her. She nodded, swallowing hard. He gestured toward the bed. "You take that." "I'll sleep on the porch." "I couldn't." "You can, and you will," he said firmly. "Bolt the door if it helps." When he walked out and shut the door behind him, Mary hesitated with her hand hovering over the lock. After everything she'd been through, trust didn't come easy. But slowly she slid the bolt into place, and for the first time since childhood, she slept without fear of a man entering her room. Morning light woke her. For a moment she didn't recognize where she was. Then she heard the steady rhythm of an axe outside. She peered through the window. James was splitting wood, shirtless under the warm sun. Muscles worked beneath tanned skin, scars cut across his back like pale reminders of a hard life. Something about the sight made her breath catch. She didn't know if it was fear, gratitude, or something she didn't yet have a name for. He turned slightly, and she pulled back from the window before he caught her watching. When she stepped outside, he paused only long enough to nod. "Morning. Coffee's on the stove." She gathered eggs from the chicken coop and cooked breakfast. As they ate, James studied her hands. "You sew?" he asked. "Yes." "Your stitches are clean. You learned young." "My mother taught me," Mary said softly. He nodded, not pushing for more. After breakfast, he asked, Fence line needs checking. You can stay here or come along." She didn't want to be alone. Not after so many days running, not with danger still behind her. "I'll come." They rode through pine trees and open meadows. Mary wasn't skilled on horseback, but James kept an easy pace. The air smelled of sap and sunlight, and for the first time in days, her body relaxed. "You said you've been running," James said as they crossed a narrow footbridge. "You don't have to tell me why, but trouble has a way of following folks who flee." Mary stared ahead. "I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice, sometimes just a hard one." When they reached a broken fence, James knelt to study the dirt. "Boot prints," he said. "Recent." Mary's stomach turned cold. "Webb's men?" "Could be anyone, but I don't like it." They rode back faster. As they neared the cabin, James suddenly lifted his hand. "Stop." She froze. Smoke still rose from the chimney. Everything looked normal. But James slid from his horse, drawing his gun. "Stay back," he whispered. Marie whispered, "James." She spotted a shadow by the corral, movement that didn't belong. Then a gunshot cracked the air. James dove behind a water trough as more shots tore into the yard. Men stepped out from behind trees, hard-faced, guns drawn. Well, one called out. "James Callahan." James, jaw tightened. "Not long enough, Wade." Quote. The leader, a tall man with a scar pulling at his mouth, grinned. "Boss wants a word with you." James didn't flinch. "Tell Morrison I said no." Wade's smile faded. "We can do this the easy way or the way where folks die." Mary saw one of the gunmen creeping along the fence trying to flank James. She didn't think, she ran. Bullets whined past her as she dove into the cabin, grabbed a rifle from the rack, and braced it at the window. She aimed. Her father had taught her to shoot before he died. She squeezed the trigger. The gunman near the fence screamed and fell, clutching his shoulder. "Oh, the girl's got teeth!" someone shouted. Gunfire intensified. James fired from behind cover. Mary fired from the cabin, giving him a chance to move. Then hooves thundered from the tree line. 3 riders burst into the clearing, guns raised, badges glinting in the sun. Sheriff Tom Brennan roared, "You boys want to drop those guns, or do we do this the messy way?" Wade cursed but lifted his hands. Brennan's deputies disarmed the men and hauled them away. "You all right?" James asked Mary, stepping onto the porch. She nodded, though her knees trembled. "Who are these men?" "Trouble from my past," James said, his voice tight, the kind that doesn't go away easy. "And what about me?" Mary whispered. "I brought danger too." James shook his head. "No, this was coming long before you showed up." Together they repaired the bullet holes until the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and copper. Mary looked at him, the man who had protected her, fed her, given her shelter. A man she shouldn't trust. But her heart already did. And she didn't know yet that the fight tonight was only the beginning of the danger coming for them both. Mary didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the gunman, the dust, the danger, the way James had thrown himself into the line of fire to protect her. She sat awake by the window, watching the moon carve pale light over the river. Somewhere out there, men were still hunting her. And now, they were hunting James too. By dawn, James was already outside, moving slower than usual, checking the yard, studying tracks. His face was tight with worry. When Mary stepped out onto the porch, he looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart thud. "Mary," he said quietly, "Morrison won't stop. Webb won't stop." And those men Wade brought, they were hired guns. Professionals. Someone put a lot of money into finding you. Her breath caught. "You think they know I'm here?" "I think they know you ran west," James answered. "And Webb is too smart to give up on something he paid for. Men like him always collect their debts." Mary's hands trembled before she clenched them tight. "I won't go back." "I know," James said softly. "And I won't let them take you." Those words were simple, but they reached deep inside her chest, settling into a place that hadn't known warmth in years. Sheriff Brennan rode in later that morning. His horse was lathered with sweat, and his face was grim. "Callahan, Mary," he said, swinging down. "There's trouble." He wasn't one to waste words, and today he didn't. "Webb's back in the territory. He ain't alone." Mary felt the ground sway beneath her feet. James' jaw locked. How many men did he bring? "More than last time, and worse," Brennan said, pulling a paper from his coat. "He went to the federal marshal, said Mary is bound by a legal contract signed by her stepfather. A false contract, but one he claims is real." Mary shook her head. "He's lying." "I know," Brennan said, "but he's using the law to back his claim. The marshal's riding this way right now." Mary's heart dropped. "If the marshal believes Webb—" "He won't take her," James said, stepping forward, voice like steel. "Not while I'm breathing." Brennan nodded. "You may have to prove that." They didn't have time to prepare much. James positioned rifles around the cabin. Mary gathered ammunition. Brennan set traps and marked defensive positions. They worked in silence, moving fast, fear and determination tightening every breath. Around noon, they heard riders. Not one. Not two. A dozen. James pulled Mary behind him, hand on his gun. Brennan stood solid at his side. The riders came into view, Webb at the front, dressed neat and calm like he wasn't a man who bought and sold human lives. Behind him were armed men, and beside them, the federal marshal. Mary felt sick. James stepped forward. "Marshal, Sheriff Brennan is here. He can vouch." "Save it," the marshal snapped. "There's a contract stating this young woman belongs in Webb's custody until her stepfather's debts are paid. I'm here to enforce it." "I'm not property," Mary said, voice fierce. "You have no right." "According to this paper, I do." James stepped between them. "She stays here. She's free." "That's not your decision," Webb said, smiling coldly. "You're interfering with federal law, and that's punishable." Brennan moved up beside James. "Marshal, that contract is forged. No court would honor it." "Maybe," the marshal said, "but until a judge rules, she goes with him." "No!" Mary cried. James' hand tightened around hers. "You'll take her over my dead body." Webb smirked. "That can be arranged." And then chaos exploded. Gunmen fanned out. Shots cracked through the air. Brennan fired first, taking down a man near the corral. James pulled Mary toward cover as bullets tore through the dirt at their feet. "Stay behind me!" he shouted. "I'm not leaving you!" she yelled back. Webb's men pushed forward, using boulders and trees for cover. The marshal ducked behind a fallen log, shouting orders that no one followed. Webb's eyes were fixed on Mary like a hunter tracking prey. James fired shot after shot, steady and precise. Mary grabbed a rifle and took aim the way her father taught her. She hit a man creeping along the fence. Another ducked when she fired again. "You've got courage, girl!" Brennan shouted over the gunfire. "She's got more than that," James answered. "She's got reason to survive." The fight grew brutal. Men shouted. Horses screamed. Bullets cracked against the cabin walls. Mary saw James step out to get a clearer shot, and then she saw the man aiming at him from the side. "James!" she cried. She fired before she could think. The man fell, and James turned back, shock in his eyes. "You saved my life," he breathed. The moment didn't last. Webb stepped from behind a pine tree, raising his pistol toward James. Back. Mary gasped. But another gun fired first. Sheriff Brennan's shot hit Webb square in the chest. The man staggered, stunned, rage twisting his face as he fell to the dirt. His gun slipped from his hand. Mary stared at his lifeless body, her whole world tilting. It was over. The surviving gunmen threw down their weapons. The marshal rose, pale and shaken. I didn't know," he said weakly. "Webb lied. All of this. It was built on lies." James glared at him. "Then fix it." The marshal nodded quickly, already tearing the forged contract in half. Miss Whitfield is free. No claim on her whatsoever." Mary could barely breathe. Relief washed through her in waves so strong it made her knees wobble. James caught her. "It's done," he whispered. "You're safe." But Mary wasn't looking at Webb anymore. She was looking at James, the man who had fought for her, stood beside her, chosen her, the only man who ever saw her as more than something to trade or control. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "I'm free because of you." "No," James said softly. "You're free because you ran, because you fought, because you never gave up." He brushed a hand along her cheek. "And because you were brave enough to trust me." She leaned into his touch, heart full in a way she'd never known. The danger was gone. But something new had taken its place. Hope. And a future she finally believed she deserved.